gonna go in 3, 2, 1, and
Hi, this is the Gillmor Gang. I'm Steve Gillmor, and we've got in London, Frank Radice.
Hey, Steve. Hey, gang. Thanks for having me. And I'm really excited because Denis brought along his kitty.
Okay, I think that's enough for a super. Denis is Denis Pombriant. Welcome, Denis.
That's me. I'm famous for herding cats.
and where is the cat?
He's on the floor eating.
Left the building.
I think it's Steve who herds cats. That would be us.
No, I claim no responsibility or duty in that area. Let's see. From Palo Alto is Keith Teare.
Hey everyone, nice to be here. A wonderful day in Palo Alto. The sky is blue, the sun is shining, and the trees are green. Sounded like a Simon and Garfunkel song, didn't it?
I was just going to say that's a song lyric. You're really into these song lyrics these days now, Keith.
You know, as you get older and you become more useless, you have to find a talent. I'm hoping it's songwriting.
We lost Michael again.
Yeah, I can see that. We're having some intermittent problems with Michael Markman from the Pacific Northwest, and we'll see whether he can come back in. We continue to suffer from the unavailability of Brent Leary, who is dealing with a family emergency. Okay, so we'll get started, and if we have to re-rack, we'll do so. But I'd prefer to just begin with throwing it open to the gang. What do you want to talk about?
How about all the songs that have all the songs that are being sold by all of the old artists from the 80s?
Oh yeah,
huge story. That's insanity. How many?
The future value of current assets, Frank. The future value of current assets.
I wonder if they're selling them for Bitcoin.
Why do you think they're doing it?
I think they're getting old and want to cash in. That's what I think.
Yeah, you can't.
Yeah, but none of them is poor.
You can't.
None of them. They could take their songbooks and leave them as a legacy to their family or their loved ones or whatever, or even to charity, rather than cashing out. Now, Keith, you talk about the future value. Is that a way of saying the value of those songs is going to decline over time?
Well, mostly the opposite. So obviously the buyers have to have a reason to buy, and the sellers have to have a reason to sell, and they have to be somewhat aligned. That is what I do in my day job, buying and selling companies. So, the seller, it's all about cashing in the current value, and the buyer, it's all about estimating whether the future value is higher than the current value. And in the case of classics, it almost certainly is always higher than the current value. You can buy 10 years worth of royalties, for maybe 2 years worth.
I also think an interesting dynamic that's going on now in the music business is this switch over from regular radio and sales of records and that sort of thing to digital plays, which actually eat up so much content in order for there to be a return that is of any value. So you need a lot of songs playing a whole bunch of times, and people have to be asking for them and then using them in order for a commensurate amount of money to be paid back to the artist, unlike the way it was when radio was king. And I think still, even in that dynamic, it's still the world of the big artist. It's still the world of the superstar. It's not the world of the independent, unfortunately. And those, as you say, Keith, I think the sellers know that they have value. That's why they're all the big names, and the buyers know that they need to get a lot of stuff. So, artists that sell a person like Dolly Parton, I saw last night in his documentary they were playing here in the UK, has written 5,000 songs. 5,000 songs. That's absolutely insane. And many of her songs have been gigantic hits. But think about Paul McCartney or Prince or, those, I guess Prince's estate would be the ones that would sell it. But just think about the big names that are selling their songs right now, or their publishing groups, and they're looking at large amounts of money.
On New Year's Eve, I was the DJ at my wife's family's kind of party after Christmas Eve dinner. And I probably played 100 songs. Every single song was back catalog because I'm me, and they all knew those songs. What was really interesting is my teenage boys, all three of them, even though they got up and danced, really didn't know the songs and would never, 20 years from now, they won't play those songs. So it's interesting that we might be the last generation for whom the 60s, 70s, and 80s back catalog forms the core of what we would play at a party. But that is what's being sold. It's kind of that 3 decades.
That's interesting, that because you're absolutely right. So keeping that in mind, what's the long tail value of the songs of the 60s and 70s?
How many
a couple of things to remember.
Let me just jump in here. Michael Markman, welcome.
Thank you. Let's see how long I last. It feels like real TV to me. We just lost the audio on that guy. Oh, we just lost that picture.
Okay, well, we just
It's
lost
just
the
like real
super.
TV.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
So I think there are a couple of things. One thing is, when you're selling a song catalog, you are earning plays from all the cover versions. And a lot of these Dylan songs and McCartney's, many of them, Dolly Parton, have huge royalties coming in from covers. We still listen to the songs of the 30s and the 40s. I don't know what Gershwin's estate royalty statements look like, but I imagine I could live on them. But the other thing to remember is that in the streaming world, it's not simply requesting songs. There are all kinds of algorithmic radio stations that people will just put on that almost act like disc jockeys in the radio days.
Right.
So you can ask for songs like this, or you can ask for play folk music from the 50s, and whatever category you want to explore, whether it's one that you're currently listening to or not, they will serve it up to you, even if you don't know the names of any of the artists or the songs.
I think largely what's going on here. I think largely what's going on here is akin to the art world, where when a Picasso or something that is sold for millions of dollars, it basically sets the range of the market. And Dylan doing this, his sale, I think, set the market. And there's a company called Hypnosis,
Yes.
which is run by some player whose name I can't remember, has then jumped in and started to buy up a bunch of people because now there's a market.
I was just thinking about a project that a friend of mine was working on. He just launched, did the marketing for the launch of one of the new streaming services, a big one, and they had chosen a song from the movie The Greatest Showman, and the amount of money just for the sync rights was over $100,000, not including the cost of the performance. And so, the amount of money that is made by other medium using these pieces of music is astonishing. It's
Yes,
really
'cause
a lot.
rights-
And then,
sync rights are negotiable. The per play rights are kind of set. There's not much room there. So if you're in Madison Avenue and you want to get some song that you love, or you think your customers will love as a background to your commercial, or put it in your movie, that's all negotiable. And
especially if you're talking about you negotiate the fee for the artist if you want the original song. Otherwise, you could re-record it
Right.
But re-recording it requires the rights of the rights to be released by the publisher and the writer, and there's a long list of people attached. A song isn't just a person for the most part.
Musical intellectual property is one of the most complex things that I know about because of all those factors. So it may involve the union of the players. It may involve the rights to use the name. It involves more than just can we have your song?
Could also be that you've got to pay the producer who worked on it in the control room because they have some back end piece of it. It's not unlike a use of a movie clip where you have to pay, for example, the director in the Directors Guild and the background actors and the character actors, let alone the foreground actors, the stars, and all of that. It gets really complicated and it's big money. So that's why.
By the way, that's why Steve won't let me sing on the gang, because he thinks there may be some copyright implications depending on what I sing.
Reason.
He's constantly saying, "Turn that music in the background off." I get that.
No, I'm a dead air.
There's no fair rights. There's no fair use. I mean, there is, but in reality, I don't think there's really. You can always claim fair use, and then you have to litigate it.
There's a good friend of mine who's an attorney in this area and one of the best, and he basically says, "Don't do that, or they'll take your house."
It reminds me, many years ago, Steve, you'll remember this, the very first TechCrunch party on Sand Hill Road. I videoed it for Mike, and I put it on YouTube with the soundtrack of Woodstock, because my video was all these people showing up with backpacks and walking up the hill, very like those scenes from Woodstock when people were walking to the thing. And I put it on YouTube with Woodstock, and it's never been taken down.
Oh, you're lucky. I did a presentation with this is not specifically music. This is about film. I did a presentation with the guy, I've mentioned it a couple of times, who did the art directing for the movie Blade Runner. And the Blade Runner, we couldn't get the rights to actually screen Blade Runner, which was really kind of interesting. And he was an Oscar-nominated art director for that movie. So they had done a documentary on the art direction of that movie, which we then used to show clips of. And it was immediately taken down by YouTube because the movie company filed an action against me. So rather than lose my house, I went ahead and let them take it down.
Keith, is your video monetized?
I'll put the link.
No.
I'll go and find it.
Is it monetized? Do you get any money from it?
No, I don't, which is interesting.
I
don't monetize my YouTube channel. And so I could have gone back and I could have maybe made some kind of an argument, but I chose not to because other people can copy it.
YouTube has deals in place where for certain music and certain publishers, there's no problem. They just send the money directly to the publisher. They don't send it to the uploader.
Yeah. Well, there was no money involved in this, which I thought was kind of interesting, but I get it. And it was really one of those, kind of felt like Keith. Hey, it's Woodstock music, but nobody's going to notice.
Well, my strategy is to keep the audience to a minimum to avoid any issue. How am I doing?
That's good.
There you go. I put the link in.
I don't know. We've actually got a fairly decent number of people that have joined my watch party. I don't know about yours, Keith, if you started a watch party tonight, but
I did, but I don't have any friends anymore on Facebook. They've all deserted me. So
you should think about that.
Well, you know what? We actually should think about. Did any of you see that list of social media sites that had dropped Trump? It was astounding. I mean, it was like the only one that I didn't see on there was Tinder.
I have 8 viewers on my watch party, so there is some.
I've seen various lists, Frank. It's really remarkable. Speaking of, talk about setting the market. As soon as Twitter did it, everybody seemed to follow.
I wonder if I wonder what the pushback is going to be, and whether there is any sort of legitimacy to pushback. You know, is it a free speech thing? Is it because he incited violence? What is it? You know, why, for example, I don't even know what he had on Instagram, but one of them was Pinterest, which I found really interesting also. So I wonder how all of it, whether it was, hey, here's a chance for us to do it, we're just going to go ahead and do it, or if there were like legitimate reasons.
The New York Times article that Denis, was it, that posted this morning? Somebody posted a New York Times article at t.me/Gillmor gang. And it went into the whole decision making from Dorsey was in French Polynesia, which I think he still is. And his second in command, a woman, made the decision. He was contacted and he agreed with it. And then there was a petition from 300 of the employees asking for it, which hadn't yet been delivered, but one would assume they knew about. So there was quite a lot of turmoil inside Twitter and a lot of back and forth that resulted in first the decision, and then the New York Times article goes on to what happened afterwards, which was Dorsey's very lengthy Twitter stream a couple of days ago now. So it definitely wasn't a knee-jerk, you know, there was a lot going on. I think you can safely say that.
Right.
I think your point about the piling on after Twitter made the decision is it's accurate. I mean, it seemed like the floodgates opened at that point.
So I wonder if there's anyone who can open the floodgates among the senators, the GOP senators, with regard to the trial. Is there
That's
anyone
a great
who can stand
question.
up and say, we got to get rid of this guy and get a 2/3 majority?
It was really disappointing how many House representatives from the Republican side stayed with him. I mean, actually, when you think about it, it was a tiny number that deserted him.
10.
Given the gravity of what happened, you would have anticipated a much larger schism.
Yes, there
I
was.
don't get it.
You would accept that that represents the largest schism in an impeachment vote in history.
Ever, yeah, because they're always partisan.
It's always very partisan, right?
But
if you were to extrapolate the 10% against the total House versus, or the 10 representatives against the total House number, and extrapolate that out into the Senate, what you're likely to get one person. And you already know that's going to, I think you'll get more than that, but you already know that.
Closer to 5. I think it would be closer to 5. Because I'm only extrapolating.
And what do you need?
2/3,
you need 2/3. Yeah.
So that's all the Democrats plus 17 Republicans.
Which, I mean, I don't know about you guys. I don't see that happening. So then this is mainly for history. It's an important statement for history, but it may not have practical consequences in terms of an actual conviction.
Richard Haas said today, I'm sorry, go ahead, Dennis.
It may not be necessary to have a conviction in the Senate in order to have some of the, perhaps all of the fallout from it that we'd like. If Trump is convicted of any felonies, and my God, there are a few that he's going to be indicted for, that would prevent him from running for elected office ever again.
Yeah.
So that would.
And what about all of his ex-presidential perks, like office allowance and Secret Service and the pension?
Yeah, that won't touch that. But on the scale of things, if he goes away, I'd be happy to let him take that.
Yeah, because that $1 million a year and travel will really do him a lot of good when he's sitting there in Club Fed. I think it was Richard Haas from the Council on Foreign Affairs, I believe. I hate to attribute this to him if it wasn't him, but someone of his ilk was talking about how the worst thing that could happen is for the trial to end up letting him off, and that would then allow him to continue to spew his unique brand of spew.
A
Well,
week,
you have to look at it as just one cog in a big wheel. He'll go to trial in the Senate, and maybe he will get off, maybe he won't get off. I think federal court and state court in New York is going to be a much tougher venue for him, with real impartial jurors looking at the evidence. So he's not home free. He's going to be wearing an ankle bracelet.
So, Denis, what do you think? A week ago, when we had the gang, I thought we may have witnessed the beginning of the end of this, hard partisan blocks because of McConnell's speech in the Senate at the certification of the election. I thought, wow, that actually is a very good speech against Trump, and that must signal the end of an era in a way. Now, after the House vote, a week later, that instinct feels wrong, and it feels as if even if Trump can't run again or doesn't run again, some version of Trumpism is emboldened even. Looking at the parlorless, Twitterless dialogue, there's still all these people saying, I read something this morning. Let's go and block the White House and not let Biden in with armed militias. So even the hardcore hasn't gone away and is somewhat emboldened, probably feeling good about what they did. But you would think the schism between them and the mainstream would have opened up, but now it seems to have healed at least partially. So what does the next 2 or 3 years look like in terms of Democratic strategy to minimize that block, if you like?
Well, I think I hear two questions. The first question, was this the apotheosis? The answer to that is that there are no straight lines. Just as the stock market moves up in with sawtooth movements, and it goes down with sawtooth movements often, sometimes it just crashes. But in general, it goes up and down with sawtooth movements. So the thing you look for is higher highs and higher lows, or lower highs and lower lows. And so we've got one data point with Mitch McConnell, and it's too early to say much more about that. The second question, how do you turn this around? I think you have to go to root causes. I think one of the things we haven't done is look at root causes. The things that we're talking about as root causes are things like white supremacy, and I think that's a symptom, not a cause. And I think the root causes go back to at least the economic crash in 2008. And you've got a large population of undereducated people, or not undereducated, but people who were educated for a different economy, an economy where they made things, an economy that has largely been shipped offshore. So I think the play, if you're a Democrat, if I'm a Democrat and I'm running things, is to find a way to increase jobs in the United States for that type of person, and give them a tether, a handhold on the middle class again. And I don't think it's that hard to do. I keep going back to the 1980s and looking at the crisis in the automotive industry, when the Japanese were eating our lunch, importing small, nimble, gas-sipping cars. Detroit couldn't compete, and everyone was talking at that time about putting quotas or walls up against Japanese imports. And instead, what we came up with was native content legislation, where cars have to contain a certain percentage of moving parts that were fabricated and assembled in the United States. That seemed to have solved that problem. In addition, a whole lot of foreign car makers set up factories in the United States, from Nissan to Honda to Toyota to Volkswagen and Audi and BMW. They all make cars here now. It's all native content all of a sudden. The big three in Detroit didn't necessarily like that because their market share got cut in half. But if you're in government and you're trying to solve this problem, you want jobs. You don't care about necessarily making sure that they're Ford or GM or Chrysler. You want to make sure that there are jobs. So I think there are a lot of ways to bring manufacturing jobs back. They involve native content. They involve other things like goosing the green economy. We've talked about that, or they've talked about that with the Green New Deal. I wrote a book about it. There's a lot to be done, I think, and I know I'm getting long-winded, but honestly,
infrastructure certainly is a big part of that, don't you think?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So basically,
The thing is, it's very clear from everything that he said so far. Biden agrees with you, and his agenda is very much in line with what you just said. The question is, how much opposition will the GOP raise to that? Because the GOP doesn't want him to succeed.
The interesting discussion, it's basically Keynesianism, putting people to work and putting money back into the economy. Not to use Keynesianism in a pejorative, I actually think it's great. There's this whole conservative money theory emerging now, which coincides. It's like Keynesianism plus, that postulates that the money supply is no longer inflationary, that you can actually print as many notes within reason as you want, put it into people's pockets, and because they have spending power, effective demand is made, and therefore production kicks in to meet it. And I can't remember, it's called consumer monetary theory. It's called consumer monetary theory. There's a book just been published, but it's now pretty widespread as a point of view, which is that you no longer have to be constrained by jobs. Money is the trigger to create jobs. And in a way, that's what's underlying what you just said, Dennis. Put money to work and jobs will come, and then spending will happen.
Well, I think
that seems like that's what Biden is saying. That
I call it demand side as opposed to supply side economics. Go ahead, Frank. I'm sorry.
Well, no, that seems to be what Biden's thinking with his $1.9 trillion proposition from the night before last. The thing that I think about is because of the original question, kind of like how does this get changed? Obviously, one way is in the on the money side, and but the other way is I don't think you're going to change. And I heard this today from I want to say it was one of the lawyers from the Lincoln Project. I heard him say that you're not going to change the adults in the room. You're not going to change the adults. The way that this gets changed in the future is educating the kids. Those and I see some legitimacy in that content. That seems
Absolutely.
like the right kind of idea.
I agree, but how far away is that future? We happen to have a crisis right now. So,
yeah, and these people are
some of
not
this
old.
change
They're not.
has to happen now, not when today's school kids get out into the workforce and the voting force.
Well, and the other thing I thought about when I heard that, although I agreed with it, was the fact that if you took a look at the sort of the demographic, just at first blush, of the people that were rioting in Washington, they were in their 30s and 40s for the most part, and they were a pretty widespread. They weren't very color balanced, but they were in their 30s and 40s. So that means that their kids there's a long way to go before their kids take over.
Well, the good
On one
news,
hand,
though, The good news, though, Frank, is that we're talking about white people, and if you're looking at the makeup of America today and the Democratic coalition that won the election, it's black, brown, Hispanic, and white. Whites are not the majority, and I think if you look at black, brown, and Hispanics, I don't think you're going to have the same learning curve vis-a-vis Keynesian economics, because there are a lot of people that have been waiting all their lives to see something like this get pushed into full motion. I would also say one thing, Keith, about what I'm going to call demand side economics, or maybe two things. I put an article from Paul Krugman in the app this week that talked about one of the good economic things that came out of the Trump presidency or the Trump administration was the new understanding that you could run the economy hotter than we've been running it. He was aiming at 4%, and Krugman seemed to indicate, yeah, you put money to work, it's not going to be inflationary. You can get to 4%. You can get to higher employment rates. So there's all that to look forward to. The other thing, though, is that if you look at the economic K wave, the wave named after Kondratiev, government spending, big spending, is not inflationary in the early phases of a K wave. And we are at the beginning of a K wave for greening the economy, what I refer to as the age of sustainability in my book. That could last 20 to 30 years. But if you get hooked on that kind of spending over that period of time, there's going to become a point that my children will see. I probably won't live to see it. My children will see that all of a sudden we get to a point where it's like the 1970s again, and we have tremendous inflation and unemployment because all of a sudden we'll be pushing on a string because there'll be no good investments to be made anymore.
I'm familiar with Kondratiev as well. Long waves and short waves, and
right.
Long waves are the K waves. But the interesting thing about this modern monetary theory is it associates money with production. And it makes the point that printing money is only bad if that's all you do. But if printing money leads to increased production, then there's true value enshrined in that money. And therefore you don't get the inflationary uptick. And I can't find anything logically wrong with that. It isn't my tradition of thinking, to be honest. I read Smith and Ricardo, Mill, and Marx, and long waves were all to do with the declining rate of profit in that world.
Harpo or Chico?
Definitely Carl.
Boy, that's a Firesign Theater reference if I ever heard one.
Exactly. But so I think maybe not a long conversation now, but this wave theory and money theory, I've started wanting to read all the books because there's stuff I don't understand that feels intuitively correct.
I agree.
Yeah, but doesn't intuitive correctness say don't just keep printing money?
Actually, no, because, well, it's about debt versus printing money. So one way to do the 1.9 trillion is debt. So basically the national debt rises because you borrow it from someone, usually China. The other way is to print money. And the argument is if you print money, there's no debt and production rises equal to or better than the money you print because you put it into people's hands. And therefore it balances out. And your debt declines actually because now you got more taxes.
So what happens to that money in the world market? The value of that money in the world market?
The dollar would decline against other currencies if production didn't kick in. But if production kicks in, it doesn't.
Then it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Yeah, another way to say that is that we would be investing in the productive capacity of this economy, and I totally agree with that.
The political obstacle is that there is a a non-sophisticated understanding of money that Republicans are always exploiting. Don't spend more than you have. Don't build up the debt. And it's very easy to make those speeches because you may get an analog to a household budget or a personal budget. Don't run up your credit card bill to the point where you
Yeah,
can't.
but isn't that against exactly what happened under the Trump administration?
What happens
They
now?
only say this during a Democratic administration, but it is
Yeah.
it is in their script folder.
What
And we're already starting to hear that from them.
What happens now is that your local bank basically prints money, not the Federal Reserve. So you go to your bank, you ask for a loan, they say yes because you qualify, or a credit card for that matter, and you can now spend money that hasn't been printed. So the circulation of money increases, led by consumer debt or small business debt or whatever. And so there's printing of money that is matched by debt. And that doesn't create production. So this modern monetary theory is saying, no, let the government actually print money, literally give it to people. So it coincides with universal basic income as a concept as well. Literally give it to people so they can spend it. They'll buy stuff they want, and production will rise to meet that demand. I can't fault it. It seems logical to me, but on the other hand, it would be kind of like magic.
Well, it's Keynesianism, though. I mean,
Yeah.
at the beginning of the conversation, you mentioned Keynes, and that's fundamentally what he was all about.
Yeah.
And it works.
We
It's
could
been
use
working for 100 years.
We could use a little magic right now, though, I think.
Michael, I agree with the point you just made. It seems like the GOP relies almost exclusively on microeconomics when the Democrats are in power, and then switches over to being macroeconomic when they want to borrow a lot of money or just give a lot of tax cuts and not pay for them. And I think one of the things we have to do in the years ahead is to have a serious educational conversation over many years about the difference between macro and micro, and when each is appropriate. It's entirely necessary and appropriate for citizens to understand that.
I agree. I just I think it's a hard thing to accomplish.
Yeah, because
people are so
their eyes roll into
arithmetically and mathematically challenged that the eyes glaze over when you try and explain things that how numbers relate to other numbers.
No, that just happened to me.
There you go.
Oh, is that when you were falling asleep back there, Steve?
No. My eyes rolled into the back of my head. The difference, explaining to a large portion of the population the difference between and different values of micro and macro economics. I don't know what the hell that means.
Yeah, so you wouldn't explain it, but you'd want you would want Biden's cabinet to understand it.
And I think
certainly the director of the Office of Management and Budget needs to understand it.
Well, I mean, there's somewhat of a chance that that's true already. So
I have a fair amount of confidence that Biden and his chief cabinet officers who are dealing with this are very articulate in explaining it, and they will be explaining it a lot again and again and again.
I think that
you will have the chorus on the other side who will be drawing false analogies. So,
well,
we can be
heartened. What you look for is results. You're right. People don't understand macro, micro, but they understand results. They understand if they're getting ahead, if they can afford.
I think this is wimpy economics that we're, and I don't mean pejoratively. I'll gladly pay you tomorrow for a hamburger today. If the population gets a hamburger today, they're going to learn a valuable lesson.
What, that they got fed?
Yeah, they got a hamburger today, and the world didn't. And
the world didn't explode. I see that. I'm heartened by the fact that we're having this conversation as opposed to dwelling on all of the other negative stuff that we could be dwelling on pretty easily. It's like we're not going directly for the tail of that donkey.
Have I introduced you to the mute button yet?
Well, Okay, I got it. Yeah, I see.
No, I don't think there's a chance in hell that we're going to get off onto the subjects that you just were talking about.
Oh, what subjects are those?
Beats me.
Steve, that's like a red rag to the gang bull.
Yeah.
Well,
It's
some of
it's
them.
like a laser pointer. It's like a laser pointer for one of your cats, Dennis.
All right, so knock yourself
Here
out.
is
I
a broad
started
analogy.
by asking you what you want to talk about. So
Yeah. So what do we think about the investigation in Georgia and the investigations in New York and what those things mean to a post-Trump presidency?
Just explain what they are for people like me that think they know, but you might mean something different than what I'm thinking.
No, well, what happened in Georgia with Trump talking to the Attorney General, making an effort to change the votes down there, which wasn't even I don't know if it was probably mentioned, but not really a part of the impeachment articles. But now the Georgia Attorney General is going to investigate that. That was announced today, or I think it was they're intending to investigate that. And then there's a lot of stuff going on in New York State. There's now a big brouhaha about this compound that the family owns that's sitting on a bunch of property, some of which he donated to the government for tax deduction purposes. That is another investigation that seemed to have been opened in the last couple of days. Aside from the tax issues that he's got going, the $400 million that he personally promised to pay back, the fact that Deutsche Bank pulled out, the fact that one of the other signature bank pulled out. So I mean, I guess I'm referring to it was a story in I can't remember. It might have been Newsweek that had that image of Donald Trump with his face cracking. It's a horrible end for this guy.
Francine Hardaway in the chats on Facebook says nothing will happen. Things will continue and continue. Trump will die, and his kids will declare bankruptcy.
Well, that's something.
well, I think in what order?
Francine, I'm assuming the order you wrote it in, but if you're listening and it's a different order, put it in again and I'll tell everyone. but to me, I almost hope that starting on the 20th, we talk about the future and not about Trump anymore. So I almost don't like the focus on what might happen to Trump afterwards in case it keeps him front and center afterwards.
Yeah.
Well, my problem with the focusing on what's going to happen after is that we have A, no idea, and B, I think it's likely that none of that will happen.
What do you think will happen?
I don't know, but I suspect that it'll be some sort of deal will be made so that we can, put our time and energy into things that are not about revenge, but about, forward motion.
That won't change the minds of the 70 some odd million people, though. And that's, I think, what's on a lot of people's minds, don't you think? I mean,
Well, I don't think it's 70 million, first of all. And secondly, I'm not sure, the ones that we're concerned about right now are the ones that are breaking the law. And there are a lot of people who have opinions. And I think that's what, democracy is all about.
Well, let's go back to something Dennis said almost at the beginning, which is what are the root causes? And Dennis, you mentioned white nationalism, and then almost dismissed that as a superficial cause. But I think it's it's a very deep cause. I mean, it's a foundational cause in the country, and it's very hard to root out. It seems to subside. It seems to be suppressed from time to time, but what we've had is Trump amplifying it and exacerbating it and expressing it from the highest pulpit. So
What I agreed with Denis's characterization of white nationalism as a symptom of a deeper malaise, which Denis put back to at least 2008. I think myself, the malaise is even deeper than that. It's the closure of the auto factories in Detroit and the gradual change in the American economy to a service economy from a manufacturing economy over a long period of time. But racism and nationalism usually are when people feel as if they're lacking resources and they look for somebody else to take them from, or who they blame for having gotten them. So that divide and rule is founded in economics, which it then expresses itself in politics and then on the street. That's one thing that this week proved. Economics, politics, and the street are kind of joined together in that order.
Right.
Well, don't you think that
Right, Keith, I think-
all of this, we're talking about stuff that sounds really great, and God, it's, magically this is all going to happen, but this is also happening in this bubble called the coronavirus, and how that will affect all of the things that we're talking about. Because if there are now more than a couple of extreme strains of this virus out there, the numbers in America and in the UK are at the highest levels they have been since the beginning of this crisis. The issue in the UK, or how about it in America? If you think about it, we're going to let you have all the virus, all the vaccines that we've got, and then it turns out they don't have any more vaccines. And over here, there are a lot of issues about distribution of the vaccines. It seems to me that all of these things we're talking about, none of it really can happen inside the bubble of the coronavirus right now.
That's true, but fixing the coronavirus is a chip shot. It really is.
Is it?
Yeah, I think so. We have vaccines. We have a problem with distribution. That's a very solvable problem. There are mutations going on, and there are variants of the virus, but nobody has yet come out and said the vaccine doesn't work on the variant. And if it does, there are ways to deal with that. Also, the administration is jumpstarting, or the new administration is jumpstarting efforts, not just for vaccines, but for antiviral therapies, which we didn't. The Trump administration put just about all of its eggs in the vaccine basket, and there were products like remdesivir that I for the life of me don't understand why those are not given out like candy.
we only made enough to cure Trump. So.
And Giuliani obviously too.
Not remdesivir is not what he cured him. It was Regeneron.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, whatever.
But not
the point is that we don't have adequate amounts of therapeutics, but that is a doable thing as well. The whole COVID thing is a chip shot.
Not to lose.
It looks difficult because we haven't done
I agree
anything.
with you, Denis, on that. I think, but Frank's right to say everything we're talking about is happening during this Corona period. But even after Corona's gone away, the stuff we're talking about won't. So Corona may not go away, because it may be that this mutation results in the need for annual vaccines and so on and so forth. So there's a lot we don't know yet.
AIDS has not gone away. It's just been managed. And likely that's going to be what happens with the coronavirus.
Yeah, but
Quite
whether that's true or not, that systemic racism or white nationalism from an increasingly disenfranchised group of people who are suffering from economic change, really, the solution for that is what we were talking about earlier, which is government-led economic growth.
And I think the parallel that we can all look at is healthcare. Obamacare flipped as soon as people had it. and realized the penalty of losing it. When people who did not have affordable health insurance finally got it and got the various other protections that are part of the act, including pre-existing conditions and keeping your kids on your plan until they're 26. It turned out to be very popular. And I think the economic steps that Biden is talking about will have the same effect. They'll be much harder to oppose after they've been around for 2 years.
And the other thing I'd say, Frank, is that we're looking at a bell curve, the population. There are some people who are rabid. They're way out there on the right tail, on the fringe. There was 10,000 of them that stormed the Capitol. 10,000 storming the Capitol sounds like a lot, but in a population of 330 million, it's not. And I think whoever said it before, that it's always been with us, is exactly right. But in the long tail, ironically, the issue with white nationalism is the same issue that we have with COVID, which is flattening the curve.
Can I? You bring up something that I actually do want to explore a little bit, and that is, you're right, 10,000 people, and I'm not even sure that the number was that high. But if you think about how it was covered, how the media saw it, and how we ended up seeing it because of what the media did and how the media did it, I'm not sure that it could have been covered any other way. It actually, I thought, was covered very well. On the other hand, what was the impression that gave to the world? Not that it was a very tiny portion of the population of America that did this, but America is under siege. I think that's a media issue, and I'm kind of struggling with that.
I think that the impact of an event does not rest on the number of people that performed it. How many people flew planes into the Twin Towers and the Pentagon? That wasn't very many people.
Yeah,
but that doesn't matter really. The size of the mob isn't the issue. It's the vulnerability of the Capitol and the peril of our representatives and the vice president and our senators.
And think then take it out, extrapolate it out to how in the world can the senators possibly not convict?
Well, some of them are accomplices.
Well, there you go. And I bet you I can't imagine there isn't video footage that somebody already has showing that some of these congressmen and senators giving these people private tours, because there's a lot of cameras in that building. If a lot of us.
If you think about a jury trial, there's a process of impaneling the jury, and you have something called voir dire, and you have to find people who can listen to the evidence and make up their minds.
Who didn't see it because the press didn't show it because it wasn't given to them or they didn't have access to it.
Something. But here, in this case, the senators, you have the victims of the crime sitting on the jury. You have accomplices to the crime sitting on the jury. It's kind of a screwy jury.
Yeah.
Yep. But I have every faith and belief that Donald Trump will be indicted for insurrection when he leaves office. He has to be.
Man, where would that indictment come from? From a local attorney general, or would it be a federal case? Or it certainly won't be the Senate if the Senate. I don't think if the Senate doesn't convict. It would be a federal
case. It would be a federal case, and I'm not an attorney, but it would come out of the Justice Department, and probably the Assistant Attorney General for, or the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia would file that case, I think. But somebody's going to file it. There's no way Trump walks away on this.
I agree with that. He won't walk away, but I think there's a difference between him getting punished when found guilty, and due process and everything has to happen. Between that and us talking about it, not meaning us, the gang, but we, the society, talking about it, rather than talking about the kind of stuff we've been talking about so far on the show. So I'm hoping we don't talk about Trump too much. I'm hoping he gets his due deserts whilst we move on.
Well, Keith, I share that. I think what we're probably going to see is a pile of indictments that will cause legal fees that would make Trump go broke and take the rest of his life. And so I think that would be the crux of the deal. Plead no contest to those indictments and get a pardon. And
That's only the criminal side of things. There's also civil liability.
oh yeah,
You remember what happened after OJ was acquitted?
yep.
He was sued by the families of the victims, and that cost him $33 million in a payment, plus whatever his legal fees were. So the number of people that can be claiming that they have standing to sue Trump from the sexual assault cases, from the injuries in this uprising, from any number of injuries that people have had.
Yeah, you make a good point, and it almost sounds like what might need to happen is some court needs to assign somebody to be a special master of Trump's legal imbroglios. I mean, a special master is somebody who, for example, there was a special master after 9/11 to deal with all of the claims of wrongful death by all of the victims. And the special master amassed a pile of money and doled it out to each claimant based on actuarial tables and things like that. I could see a special master operating in a similar way with all of Trump's indictments, taking most of his money and giving 25 cents on a dollar or 10 cents on a dollar to various claimants.
And
the special
you mentioned
master is
money,
also
that
gonna-
brings up a third category when you mentioned money. The banks are cutting him off.
Yeah.
I actually flashed onto Giuliani going after him for his $20,000 a day fee that he's decided he's not going to pay him.
He has a lot of
the special, I
hair
guess,
dye
yeah.
is really getting control there in terms of cost.
And the special master also is empowered to look at other legal issues and keep them from becoming a part of the big pile of legal issues that they actually go after somebody for. So it's not just a matter of looking at the pile of issues and then doling out the money or whatever. There's all that other stuff that has to be looked at, because I would imagine that everything from Giuliani not getting paid to the sexual harassment stories to the to the banks, to the properties, to all of that stuff. There's just tons of legal issues involved in that have already existed and are still sitting there somewhere that are percolating in other jurisdictions.
You're right. If I could say just one thing, I would say there are elements of a deal to be made.
Yeah,
it's just a question of getting jurisdiction and getting it done.
And at some point, the people that are arrayed against Trump are going to have to come to terms with the fact that exploiting these, legitimate crimes, or whatever they are adjudicated to be, is going to have the counter effect of promoting Trump. And at some point, I think it's already been expressed on this show, subtly, but nonetheless for real. We're all sick of this story. And, and there are other problems that are, that we really have to cope with now. I mean, what happened with the, wait a minute, Azar, he says, I'm resigning on the 20th. Okay, good. You could, how about like a year ago? But, then he says,
When wouldn't he be normally gone on the 20th anyway? That was something that I thought was kind of interesting.
well,
Doesn't he
I'm not
go?
sure. I don't know the answer, but the thing that he then said, or he didn't actually say it, was it was discovered that there's no second shot pool of product available that he and others had lied about.
Mm.
So
There isn't even enough of the first shot pool, apparently.
no,
Yeah,
I think there's.
it's better
I
than
think
that.
that what the Biden team seems to be saying is, there's a certain reluctance on the part of some of the constituents to take the virus, the vaccine, and that the distribution issues have suppressed the amount of people who've been able to acquire it. They're not suggesting that it doesn't exist, and that it will, over a certain amount of time, the stocks will be replenished. So, the
California's
thing that was interesting about it to me was that, basically they're running out of not vaccine, they're running out of excuses and for what their performance has been. And it's going to be, the change of administration is going to put in place the same rigor of, perhaps more rigor around what the Biden administration says they're doing and how successful that is. And I think that's really healthy because it's going to get vaccine out and in the arms of people like me, and then people like Tina, and then people like our children. And, that's going to suppress the virus to a point where we can live with it. So
Yeah,
this is
Dennis's
job one.
point, I guess. So when as a question that I don't have an answer to, when did America decide that it was going to enlist the aid of the people in the military who actually know how to do this kind of large scale distribution of product? Isn't that just recent? It's
So
like
that is Operation Warp Speed, as far as I know.
I don't know that
really
that's,
that
I
don't
don't know
think
that that's
so.
really happened, has it?
It hasn't happened yet, but it's certainly part of what Biden has been talking about. I don't think we have the full plan revealed yet. We just have the fact that he promises a result, and he has a really good team working on the plan. So
well, they're doing it here already in the UK. I mean, you go to some of these large scale vaccination facilities, which are in some of the like in the stadiums, the big facilities. You'll see military there helping out.
I expect it will happen, but I don't know, because we're in this transition period. I don't know who makes decisions or when decisions become really decisions, but I think that's part of the plan.
California,
Dennis,
California just announced a plan that goes down to the county level. So I went yesterday to look at my county, and you can go from the county down to the primary care providers. The primary care providers are meant to disclose how much of the virus they've got, and they all have 4 phases. Phase 1 is people over 75 and direct responders, and that's the phase everyone's in right now. So if you're 75, you can make an appointment and go and get vaccinated right now in my county. The next phase is 65 and above, which then I'll qualify. And it's with my normal primary care provider. So they seem to be using the distribution channels that people use for healthcare. Now, if you haven't got medical insurance and you don't have a primary care provider, then it's a whole other issue.
Well, I can tell you in my neighborhood, in my backyard, Gillette Stadium, where the Patriots play, is being set up as a vaccination center. And I think they got set up on Friday, yesterday, and they administered a small number of vaccines, but they're going whole hog on Monday. The other thing I'd
CVS,
say,
I think, isn't the CVS stores in America, I hear, are are also going to be part of the distribution.
True, true. And Biden, not Trump, has already announced that they're going to use FEMA for its tactical skills at dealing with disasters to set up pop-up vaccination centers to make the process go a bit better, a bit further. In my state, I know they're recruiting retired doctors, nurses, and dentists, and I think maybe even veterinarians. Anyone who knows how to handle a hypodermic needle.
I imagine they'll also. I imagine they'll also train new people to handle hypodermic needles. I don't know if there are enough. But we'll see.
Denis, you raised your hand when I said wouldn't Azar be gone on the 20th? I don't even know the answer to that question. I know that that everyone in the cabinet writes a letter of resignation and presents them to the next president, who decides that he's going to accept those letters. Would that not happen on the 20th anyway? I just seemed to me such an odd date for him to decide that that's when he was going to do that.
Well, that's why I was raising my hand. There was an article recently that said that traditionally the sitting president requests the resignations of the cabinet, and Trump didn't do that. So the resignations aren't there. The cabinet serves at the pleasure of the president, but you have to have a president say, "I want your resignation." A few people like Elaine Chao, for example, at Transportation, already tendered her resignation and walked out. So did Betsy DeVos. But a lot of people haven't done that yet. So there might be some cleaning up to do.
I don't think this is going to be a major complication.
No, I was just curious what the
Biden to request their resignations.
I was just curious about what that process was. It just seemed like such an odd. I also thought, that when Chao and DeVos decided to resign, it felt almost like they were pulling out of any possibility that they might have to vote for the 25th Amendment.
I thought that too. Yeah. Yeah, I think you're onto something.
Usually there's a distinction between political appointees on the one hand and civil servants on the other. And in the US, like in the UK, the civil service is permanent. It survives government change. But in the US, a lot of the civil service is political appointees. So
it's still a distinction. In the administrative departments, there are civil service posts and there are political posts. And the civil service posts persist, and that's why Bannon called them the deep state, because they're always there.
Yeah.
They're the permanent government.
Yeah, right, it's a great theme in James Bond films when...
In other words, the people who know what they're doing.
Well, in quotes.
Yeah. What's this James Bond reference? I want to hear that. What's that?
No, in James Bond movies, you always get these civil servants who have been there for 30 years and really know what's going on and where the bodies are buried. And the new politicians, are always presented as clueless and really under the control of the civil servants, which I think there's a lot of truth in.
One of the moves that Trump made late in his administration was to give some of his political appointees civil service status so they could stay on past the end of the administration. So that's another issue that the Biden team is going to have to deal with. There are moles in there.
Yeah.
I actually wondered in terms of the 25th, there was so many of the cabinet members that were acting secretaries. Would they have been able to vote as though they were full-fledged cabinet members or not? It all just sounded so convoluted and complicated.
I've never seen a clear answer. The Constitution says principal officers. It doesn't say specifically, Senate approved principal officers. And we've never had the 25th Amendment invoked for this kind of a reason before, so it's never been tested.
Well, I mean,
And
the
even this
cases
time,
where we've
it's not
had
going
the
to get tested
20
now.
usually because because of medical incapacity. I mean, so someone needs a colonoscopy, so he signs over the powers to the vice president, and then when he wakes up, he takes the powers back. But we've never had it removed for cause of moral or mental incapacity.
That's a pain in the ass.
pardon me.
You didn't know you said that, did you?
Yeah, of course.
The
Frank,
door
you
just
understand
opened.
that.
The door
I
opened.
know.
I
I
went
know
through.
Frank, and you're no Frank Radice. Okay, so we've got just a few minutes left here. When's New Year's Day again?
New Year's Day?
It's
Oh.
the 20th.
20th, yeah.
It's at noon Eastern time.
Mm. Hi, hey, so
December 47.
does anybody know if that bust of Lincoln that was seen being carried out of the Oval Office, if that was actually owned by the people, or was it Trump's personal bust?
I don't know.
I wonder.
But did you happen to see Colbert that day? Because Colbert's team had written a joke that showed Trump carrying the bust of Lincoln out in a box, and that was the joke. And then he said, "Oh, wait, I guess we can't use that joke now."
There was a picture of another one of the team of advisors. Navarro was carrying out a large framed photograph of Trump and the team talking to Xi in China. It was this beautiful, clearly not his personal picture.
I'd like to see Peter Navarro carried out and thrown on the truck.
That's another.
Just like.
I have a very sidebar to a sidebar to a sidebar of a trivial question. What is Disney going to do with Trump in the Hall of Presidents at their theme parks?
It'll be the most successful part of the ride.
Oh, wait, Paolo, he shot the president. Thank you.
Gratuitous sign reference number 5 today.
Thank you. But you know what?
He broke.
As was made clear in that article that I think Keith posted, they were prescient. Much of what they had to say in their comedy came true. They were like the modern day Nostradamus.
It wasn't me. It wasn't me. I think it was Michael, right?
Yeah.
Michael, did you post that? That was a great story.
I did post it. Yes.
So I produced an album with the Firesign Theater called How Time Flies. And the cover of the album shows something called Panorama Land 2000, which was like a theme park in Las Vegas. And you see on the cover all these projections mixed with actual buildings of, the Statue of Liberty, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This was in 1973 that we recorded the record. Vegas started doing this about 20 years later.
Yeah, I was just thinking that was still Mafia Vegas.
So, they were definitely prophetic and continue to be prophetic. One of the interesting things that article said was, which I never really heard before, was that Phil Proctor, one of the group, basically suggested in a sort of ironic way that the Beatles produced Sgt. Pepper, that the Firesign had some skin in that game, which I think is not true. But, conceptually, the Goon Show represented everything that ever happened out thereafter, including Beyond the Fringe and Monty Python and on down the line. So you can call it prophecy, but it's more like what Kubrick did, I think, with 2001, which was he actually invented the look and feel of the space program, and the space program acknowledged that they basically took his research and developed the space program around it. So it wasn't so much prophetic as instructive.
But in Kubrick's case, he actually did, and he had a great collaborator in Arthur C. Clarke. He actually did a lot of research, and they did, and they talked to, rocket scientists and computer scientists, and they based it on deep knowledge. The Firesign Theater seems to have just grokked it.
I disagree.
Thank you for that reference.
I think the Firesign Theater, it was obvious at the time that we were all in. It was obvious what was going to happen.
Well, that sounds like something that Fred Allen once said to a listener who wrote in and said, "Your shows are too predictable." And he said he read her letter on the air and said, "Would you mind predicting next week's show for me?"
It takes nothing away from them. I mean, first of all, anybody who can actually create a joke is a genius. And that's not something that you teach. It's something you are. And, if it hadn't been funny, and if it hadn't come along at the time of people sitting around in college dorms smoking reefer and, playing these things over and over again, to search for the hidden meaning, and the record deal that the Firesign had, because they had this constituency in Boston where there was a confluence of college students, and they were creating a recording market that the White Album took and turned into an industry. These things were not unrelated. So it's not a question in my mind of any kind of future projection. I mean, every time I try and talk about on private calls with you guys and sometimes on the show, every time I try and talk about, well, what's going to happen? I get pushback, which is, well, who the hell knows what's going to happen? Or you don't know that, or whatever. That's true. But the act of talking about it, the act of sharing that, the act of the so-called audience making up their own mind about what they think is going to happen, that moves the needle.
So
I think we did that today, and on this show, and I think we had a pretty solid show today. I think we did that, and therefore we are the new Beatles.
It's true that every moment contains multiple potential futures in it. And what you say and do determines which of those multiple potential futures happens. So the answer to what's going to happen is, well, what are you going to make happen? And that's a lot about today's show. We talked about what we want to make happen.
Yeah.
That's wherever you go, there you are.
Yeah, Michael, you want to disagree with that before we go?
No. I mean, Keith has a very good talent for saying things that I want to disagree with, but he didn't use it then.
I'm being on good behavior today, Michael.
That makes such a good show.
All right. I want to thank our producer and director, Tina Chase Gillmor.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank us. And I want to thank the absent Brent Leary, who we love and miss and are with him in his time of difficulty. And I'm confident that he will return refreshed and ready to take on the results of the earth-shattering election in Georgia, which he was correct in predicting.
Mm.
which I think has changed everything.
Who else was correct in predicting that, Steve?
I'm not sure who. Who?
Thanks. No credit, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. I think most everybody on this show, I didn't think John Ossoff was going to be able to pull it off, but I was wrong.
No, but
And
it
I
always
think
seemed strange to me that anyone who was going to vote, most people who were going to vote, understood the value of electing both of them was greater than the value of electing one of them. So Ossoff got a few fewer votes than Warnock, but it just would seem bizarre for me that people would not get what was at stake.
But what falls out of that is subpoena power,
Yes.
and that's the whole ball game.
Mhm.
Even if they're unsuccessful at conviction, they're going to have the ability to get whatever the evidence is on the table, and that's the path to healing.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to thank Frank Radice. Thank you, sir.
Thanks a lot for having me. It was a great show today.
I want to thank me.
All right.
You're welcome.
Thank you for being there.
Okay, I want to thank Keith Teare. You've successfully navigated through your moral crisis. So
it's been a struggle, but we'll see next week if I'm still healed.
Or here.
Or here even, absolutely.
For those who don't understand what we're talking about, subscribe to the back channel. The amazing Denis Pombriant. Thank you, sir.
Hey, Steve, thanks for having me. One thing we didn't get to talk about this week, we'll have to save it for another time, is that the National Rifle Association declared bankruptcy, wants to move to Texas.
Wow.
That's a whole show.
Texas.
Who knew?
Texas.
And
Wow.
Michael Markman. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks to everybody who showed up, and especially those who didn't. Thanks to the watch parties. And we'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Wax on, wax off.
Thank you. And we're going to stop the stream now. Thanks for everybody.